The imposing Eagle Corporation tower rose majestically against the blue sky of New York City, its glass reflecting the afternoon sun like thousands of diamonds. On the 42nd floor, Ryan Mitchell adjusted his Italian silk tie in front of the window of his office, admiring his reflection with the satisfaction of someone who knows they're at the top. "Mr. Mitchell, the board is waiting for you in the conference room," announced his assistant Mary through the intercom. "I'm on my way," he responded curtly while grabbing his tablet and latest generation smartphone. At 45 years old, Ryan had built an impeccable reputation as chief operating officer. His path to success had been paved with firm and, at times, ruthless decisions. His office, decorated with awards and recognitions, was a testament to his meteoric rise in the corporate world. In the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. The executives were discussing the latest quarterly results, and Ryan, as always, dominated the conversation with his authoritative presence. "The numbers don't lie, gentlemen," he declared, projecting graphs on the screen. "We need to cut staff in the least productive areas. It's the only way to maintain growth." "But Ryan," interrupted Carla Vaughan, the Human Resources Director, "those cuts would primarily affect minorities and—" "Carla," Ryan cut her off with a condescending smile, "there's no room for sentimentality in business. Diversity is fine for annual report photos, but in the end, what matters is profitability." The meeting ended like so many others, with Ryan imposing his will over his colleagues' objections. As they left, several executives murmured among themselves, but no one dared to challenge him openly. Evening was falling over the city when Ryan decided to walk to his apartment in Manhattan, something unusual for him. The crisp October air would help clear his mind before his dinner with investors that night. As he walked along the elegant avenue, his phone rang. It was his mother. "Son, will you come to the family dinner this Sunday?" "Mom, you know I'm busy." "The company, always the company, Ryan. Since your father passed away, we hardly see you." The mention of his father caused a pang of guilt. Robert Mitchell Sr. had been a man of principles, always preaching about the importance of humility and respect. What would he think of him now? His thoughts were interrupted when, turning a corner, he came face to face with an African-American man wearing an impeccable navy blue suit. The man seemed lost, consulting his phone. "Excuse me," said the stranger in an educated voice, "could you tell me where the Ritz-Carlton is?" Ryan looked him up and down with disdain. The prejudice, deeply rooted in his mind, activated his worst instincts. "The Ritz-Carlton?" he replied sarcastically. "Look, that hotel is quite exclusive. Perhaps you should look for something more suitable for your profile. Downtown has more economical options." The man's face hardened for a moment, but he maintained his composure. "Thank you for your suggestion," he responded with dignity. "Although I must say I have a suite reserved there. I'm David Thompson." "Listen," Ryan continued, ignoring the introduction. "I don't want to be rude, but this isn't the place for—" What Ryan didn't notice was the young woman who, from a nearby cafe terrace, was discreetly recording the scene with her phone. David Thompson simply nodded, turned around and walked away, leaving Ryan with a sense of superiority that would soon become his worst nightmare. The night passed without incident. The dinner with investors was a success, and Ryan returned to his luxurious apartment satisfied, without imagining that the encounter that afternoon would change his life forever. The next morning, Eagle Corporation Tower was buzzing with a different energy. The hallways were full of whispers and furtive glances. Mary greeted Ryan with a worried expression. "Mr. Mitchell, there are rumors. They say they'll be introducing the new CEO today." "New CEO? Impossible. No one has informed me of anything." But before he could process the information, a mass email arrived for all employees. Mandatory general meeting in the main auditorium at 10 a.m. Ryan headed to the auditorium with a firm step, although a feeling of unease was beginning to grow inside him. The place was packed. Executives, managers, and employees from all levels waited expectantly. The chairman of the board, Alexander Ruiz, took the podium. "Good morning, everyone. As you know, our company is at a crucial moment. We need to adapt to new times, and for that we've decided to bring in new blood. I'm pleased to introduce our new CEO." Time seemed to stop when David Thompson, the same man from the street encounter, stepped onto the stage with a confident and elegant stride. "Good morning. David greeted with a voice that filled the auditorium. "It's an honor to be here. Some of you may already know me." His eyes met Ryan's for a brief instant, and at that moment, the Chief Operating Officer felt the floor move beneath his feet. The rest of the presentation was torture for Ryan. David Thompson laid out his vision for the company: innovation, sustainability, and above all, inclusion. Every word seemed specifically directed at him. "In this new phase," David concluded, "there's no room for prejudice or discrimination. We will build a company where talent and respect are the only criteria that matter." As applause filled the auditorium, Ryan remained motionless in his seat, aware that his world was about to change dramatically. The day passed in a haze. Ryan locked himself in his office, avoiding contact with his colleagues. But in the mid-afternoon, a message on his computer made him pale. The video of his encounter with David had started circulating in the company's internal groups. Mary entered breathlessly. "Mr. Mitchell, the CEO wants to see you in his office now." The walk to the main office had never seemed so long. Each step resonated in his ears like a drum announcing his fate. Upon arrival, David's assistant immediately ushered him in. "Mr. Mitchell," David greeted, standing by the window, "please take a seat." The silence that followed seemed eternal. David turned slowly, his eyes fixed on Ryan. "I believe we have a pending conversation," he finally said, "about directions and about something much more important: respect." And so, as the sun began to set behind the buildings of New York City, Ryan Mitchell faced the moment that would mark the beginning of his transformation, not knowing that this was just the beginning of a long journey towards redemption. The CEO's office, once familiar territory for Ryan, now felt like hostile ground. David Thompson sat behind his desk, his presence emanating a serene authority that contrasted with Ryan's barely contained nervousness. "Do you know why I called you here, Mr. Mitchell?" asked David, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Thompson, about yesterday," Ryan began, but David raised a hand to interrupt him. "Before you continue, I want to show you something." David turned his monitor towards Ryan. On the screen were several emails from employees reporting previous situations of discrimination and prejudice in the company, many directly related to decisions made by Ryan. "This goes beyond our casual encounter," David continued. "I've been investigating the corporate culture of this company for months. Yesterday only confirmed what I already knew." Ryan felt a drop of cold sweat run down his back. His calculating mind was already anticipating the inevitable firing, the public humiliation, the end of his career. "I could fire you," said David, as if reading his thoughts. "It would be the easiest thing to do, don't you think? But that wouldn't solve the underlying problem." He stood up and walked to the window, observing the city sprawling beneath them. "Instead, I have a different proposal. I want you to lead our new inclusion and diversity program." Ryan blinked, confused. "Excuse me, you heard me. Who better to lead a cultural change than someone who needs that change? It will be a 6-month project. Your performance will determine your future in the company." As Ryan processed this information, Carla Vaughan, the Human Resources Director, entered the office with a folder. "Ah, Carla, just in time," David smiled. "Mr. Mitchell will be the leader of the project we discussed. Could you bring him up to speed?" Carla, the same woman Ryan had dismissed so many times, would now be his mentor in this process. The irony was lost on no one in the room. "Of course," Carla responded, maintaining admirable professionalism. "We'll start tomorrow with the first sensitivity workshop." The following days were a whirlwind of activities. The video of the incident had gone viral within the company, and Ryan could feel the stares and whispers every time he walked down the hallways. The first workshop was especially difficult. Seated among his subordinates, Ryan had to listen to testimonies from employees who had suffered discrimination. A young programmer of Native American descent shared how she had been overlooked for promotions despite her excellent performance. A gay executive spoke about the homophobic comments he had endured in management meetings. During lunch, Ryan found himself alone in the corporate cafeteria until Mary, his assistant, approached with her tray. "Do you mind if I sit down, Mr. Mitchell?" For the first time in years, Ryan really looked at Mary. She had been his assistant for 5 years, but he had never bothered to really get to know her. "Mary, why are you still being nice to me?" She smiled softly. "Because I believe people can change, sir. My grandmother always said that even the most crooked tree can be straightened with proper care. That afternoon, during a meeting with the project team, Carla presented Ryan's first big challenge. "We need you to give a presentation next week on the program's progress," she explained. "It will be in front of the entire company." "So soon?" Ryan protested. "We're just getting started." "Precisely," David interjected, having been listening from the doorway. "Transparency is fundamental in this process. The company needs to see your commitment." That night, in his apartment, Ryan found himself reviewing old family photographs. He paused on one where he appeared with his father at his college graduation. "What would you say now, Dad?" he murmured, remembering Robert Sr.'s teachings about the importance of treating everyone with dignity. The doorbell pulled him from his thoughts. It was Carla with a stack of documents. "I thought you might need help with the presentation," she said, entering the apartment. "And I also think you need to hear some truths." Over the next few hours, Carla shared with Ryan her own story of struggle as a woman in a male-dominated corporate world. She told him about how she had to work twice as hard to be taken seriously, about the times her ideas were ignored, only to be celebrated when presented by a male colleague. "Privilege, Ryan, is not something we should feel guilty about," Carla explained. "It's something we should recognize so we can use it to benefit others." As they worked on the presentation, Ryan began to see patterns in his own past decisions: the denied promotions, the derogatory comments, the prejudiced assumptions he had made about people based solely on their appearance or background. The day of the presentation arrived faster than expected. The auditorium was full, and Ryan could feel the tension in the air. David Thompson sat in the front row, his expression neutral but attentive. Ryan stood at the podium, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted the microphone. He looked at his prepared notes and, on impulse, set them aside. "Good morning," he began. "Many of you have seen the video that went viral a few weeks ago. That video shows the worst of me, but it also marked the beginning of a journey that I'm just starting to understand." For the first time in his career, Ryan spoke from the heart. He shared his prejudices, acknowledged his mistakes, and most importantly, expressed his genuine commitment to change. "I can't erase the past," he concluded, "but I can and want to be part of a better future for this company and for everyone who is part of it." The silence that followed was deafening until Mary stood up and began to applaud. Slowly, others joined her, not with the forced enthusiasm of corporate presentations, but with the sincere recognition of those witnessing the beginning of an authentic transformation. At the end of the day, David called Ryan to his office again. "It was a good start," said the CEO, "but remember, words are easy. It's actions that will define your true change." Ryan nodded, aware that the road ahead would be long and difficult. As he left the office, his phone vibrated with a message from his mother. "Your father would be proud of the first step you took today, son." For the first time in weeks, Ryan smiled genuinely. The weight of the consequences of his actions was still there, but now it felt more like an opportunity for redemption than a punishment. The morning began with an unpleasant surprise. Upon arriving at his office, Ryan found an anonymous envelope on his desk. Inside, a note written with letters cut out from newspapers read, "Traitors like you don't last long in this company." Ryan observed the message with a mixture of concern and determination. 3 weeks had passed since his public presentation, and not everyone had received his new stance well, especially the group of senior executives he had helped cultivate over the years. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell," Mary entered with the day's agenda. "The Diversity Committee is waiting for you in the boardroom." On the way, Ryan noticed subtle changes in the work environment. Some employees who previously wouldn't even dare to look at him now greeted him with shy smiles. Others, especially from the executive circle, deliberately avoided him. In the boardroom, Carla had already begun the meeting with the newly formed committee, a diverse mix of employees from different levels, backgrounds, and departments. "Ryan, you're just in time," said Carla. "We were discussing Anna's proposal." Anna Green, a young analyst of Native American descent, straightened in her chair. "As I was saying, we need to review the recruitment processes. The current requirements indirectly exclude candidates from marginalized communities." "For example?" asked Ryan, taking a seat. "The requirement for degrees from specific universities," Anna explained. There's incredible talent graduating from public and regional universities, but they don't even make it to the interviews. As Anna spoke, Ryan remembered how many times he had discarded resumes based on similar criteria. The weight of his past actions felt increasingly real. The meeting was interrupted by Alan Sanders, one of the oldest directors and Ryan's close ally in the past. "Excuse the interruption," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ryan, we need to discuss last quarter's numbers. The investors are concerned." In Alan's office, the true intention of the interruption became evident. "What are you doing, Ryan?" Alan snapped. "All this diversity circus is scaring the investors. The stocks have dropped 2% since the initiative began." "Changes need time, Alan," Ryan responded, surprised by his own calmness. "Time? Have you gone soft? Several on the board think Thompson has brainwashed you. This isn't the Ryan we know." "Maybe that's the point," Ryan replied, standing up. "The Ryan you knew needed to change." As he left Alan's office, Ryan ran into David in the hallway. "Everything all right?" asked the CEO, although his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "The resistance is stronger than I expected," Ryan admitted. "Of course it is," David smiled. "You're challenging a system that many have worked hard to maintain. But let me show you something." In his office, David projected a presentation with surprising statistics. Companies with diverse teams are 35% more likely to outperform their competitors. Innovation increases by 20% when there's diversity of thought and background. "The numbers don't lie," Ryan murmured, remembering his own favorite phrase. "Exactly. And speaking of numbers," David made a significant pause, "I need you to review these reports on wage discrimination in the company. I think you'll find the data revealing." That night, Ryan stayed late at the office, immersed in the reports. The salary disparities were evident. Women consistently earning less than men in similar positions, minorities concentrated in lower-ranking positions, biased promotion patterns. His phone vibrated with a message from Alan. "Urgent meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Several directors want to discuss your position in the company." Ryan felt a knot in his stomach, but he was no longer the same man who would have buckled under peer pressure. He simply replied, "I'll be there." The next morning, the boardroom was tense. 5 directors, including Alan, were waiting for him with severe expressions. "This is an intervention, Ryan," Alan began. "You've put everything we've built at risk. Either you get back in line or we'll be forced to take measures." Ryan looked at each of his former allies. "Measures, like the anonymous note on my desk." The uncomfortable silence confirmed his suspicions. "Gentlemen," Ryan continued, "I have here a detailed report of every discriminatory decision we've made in the last 5 years, every unjustly denied promotion, every unjustifiable salary difference, every ignored case of harassment." He took out a USB drive and placed it on the table. "We can do this 2 ways. You can join the change or you can face the consequences of your past actions. The choice is yours." "Are you threatening us?" growled one of the directors. "No, I'm offering you the same opportunity that was given to me, the chance to be better." As he left the room, Ryan ran into Carla, who had heard everything from outside. "That was brave," she said, "but also dangerous." "I know," Ryan replied, "but I can't be part of the problem anymore. Not after everything I've learned." That afternoon, while reviewing resumes for new positions, paying special attention to candidates he would have automatically dismissed before, Ryan received an email from David. "The true test of a leader is not maintaining the status quo, but having the courage to change it when necessary. Well done." For the first time since he began this process, Ryan felt he was truly on the right side of history. The resistance to change was strong, but his determination was even stronger. The tension in Eagle Corporation Tower had reached unprecedented levels. A week after the confrontation with the directors, the company had divided into 2 clearly defined camps: those who supported the change and those who fiercely resisted it. Ryan arrived early that morning, finding his office in complete disarray. Files were scattered across the floor. His computer showed signs of having been tampered with, and on the wall, written in red marker, "Sell out." Mary entered, horrified at the state of the office. "Mr. Mitchell, should I call security?" "No," Ryan replied, calmly picking up the papers. This only confirms that we're hitting the right nerves. As they tidied up the office, Ryan noticed something strange about the scattered files. Important documents were missing, specifically those related to the new inclusion program. His phone rang. It was Carla. "Ryan, we have a situation. Someone leaked confidential information about the program to the competition. They're using our plans to discredit us in the market." The news hit hard, but didn't surprise him. "Does David know yet?" "He's calling an emergency meeting in an hour." In the boardroom, the atmosphere was grim. David Thompson remained standing by the window, observing the city as the executives entered. Alan and his group looked suspiciously satisfied. "Gentlemen," David began, "we have a crisis on our hands, but it's not the crisis some expected." He projected several emails on the screen. These messages demonstrate who leaked the information and why. The interesting part isn't just the leak, but the plan behind it. The emails revealed a conspiracy to sabotage the inclusion program from within, led by some of the most senior directors. "Alan," David continued, "would you like to explain why you were coordinating with our competition to sink your own company?" The silence in the room was deafening. Alan visibly paled. "We just wanted to protect the company from these progressive ideas that are ruining everything," Alan stammered. "Ruining?" Ryan interjected, pulling out his tablet. "Allow me to show you something." He projected a series of graphs and statistics. "In the last 3 weeks since we implemented the first changes of the program, productivity in departments with diverse teams has increased by 15%. Job satisfaction has risen by 23%. And most importantly, we've identified exceptional talent that we previously overlooked." Anna Green, the young analyst, stood up and continued the presentation. "Moreover, our new recruitment policies have attracted brilliant candidates who wouldn't have even considered our company before. The public perception of the corporation has significantly improved." David nodded in approval. "The real crisis, gentlemen, isn't the change we're implementing. The crisis is the toxic resistance to that change." He addressed Alan and his group specifically. "Your services will no longer be needed in this company. Security will escort you to your offices to collect your belongings." As the dismissed directors were escorted out of the room, Ryan felt a mix of emotions. These men had been his mentors, his allies, but they also represented everything he now fought to change. "Ryan," David called when the room had emptied, "I need you to temporarily assume Alan's responsibilities. Prove that your change is more than words." The following weeks were intense. Ryan worked tirelessly to restructure the affected departments, implementing new inclusion and mentoring policies. He established a promotion system based strictly on merit and created open dialogue spaces for employees to share their experiences and concerns. One afternoon, while reviewing candidates for vacant positions, Ryan received an unexpected visit. It was Joe, the building's janitor, a man he had barely noticed before. "Mr. Mitchell," Joe said timidly, "I wanted to show you something." He handed over a worn folder. Inside was a university degree in computer systems engineering and advanced technical certifications. "I've been working as a janitor for 5 years because no one would give me a chance in my field," Joe explained. "When I heard your speech about change, I thought maybe—" Ryan looked at the documents, remembering how many times he had passed by Joe without even looking at him. "Would you like an interview with the IT department?" Joe's smile lit up the office. That night, as he was closing his office, Ryan received a message from his mother. "Are you coming to dinner on Sunday? Your father always said that the most important changes begin at home." For the first time in years, Ryan responded immediately. "I'll be there." In the parking lot, he ran into Carla. "You know," she said, "when David proposed putting you in charge of the inclusion program, I thought he was crazy. But now I see that it was exactly what the company needed. Someone who understood the problem from the inside and had the courage to change." Ryan smiled. "The real change is just beginning." The auditorium of the New York Convention Center was packed. Executives from the country's leading companies had gathered for the annual Business Leadership Conference, and this year, the central theme was diversity and inclusion in the corporate world. Ryan Mitchell was backstage, reviewing his notes for the presentation. 6 months had passed since the beginning of his transformation, and now he was about to share his experience with the American business elite. "Nervous?" asked David, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. "It's different when you're on the other side of the story," Ryan responded, accepting the coffee. "By the way," David added, "the numbers for the last quarter are in. We're officially the fastest growing company in the sector." Before Ryan could respond, the presenter announced him, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director of Cultural Transformation at Eagle Corporation, Ryan Mitchell." An expectant silence greeted him as he took the stage. Many of those present knew his previous reputation, which made his presence even more intriguing. "6 months ago," he began, "I was the type of executive who believed that diversity was just a buzzword, the type of person who judged based on appearances and prejudices." As Ryan shared his transformation story, he noticed different reactions in the audience. Some nodded in understanding, others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, probably recognizing themselves in his words. "But the numbers don't lie," he continued, projecting the company's results. "Since we implemented our comprehensive inclusion program, we've seen a 40% increase in innovation, a 60% reduction in staff turnover, and a 35% increase in customer satisfaction." In the front row, Joe, now the leader of the technology development team, smiled proudly. His success story was one of the most powerful examples of the program. After the presentation, during the cocktail hour, Ryan found himself surrounded by executives interested in implementing similar programs in their companies. However, one conversation in particular caught his attention. "Impressive speech, Mitchell," said a familiar voice. It was Richard Vega, CEO of their main competitor. "But I wonder if all this isn't just a very elaborate marketing strategy." "The results speak for themselves, Richard," Ryan replied. "I invite you to visit our company anytime. The doors are open." That night, during the Sunday family dinner, which he never missed now, Ryan shared the day's events with his mother. "You know what your father said when you decided to enter the corporate world?" she asked as she served dessert. "He said, 'Our son has the potential to change things from the inside.' It seems you're finally proving him right." The following week brought new challenges. Several important companies requested advice on implementing similar inclusion programs. Ryan and his team found themselves developing a replicable model that could be adapted to different business contexts. During one of these consulting sessions, Carla noticed something interesting. "Do you realize we're creating a movement?" she commented as they reviewed proposals. "Other companies don't just want to copy our program, they want to be part of something bigger." "I have an idea," Ryan replied. "What if we create a network of companies committed to inclusion? We could share resources, experiences, talent." The idea took flight quickly. In less than a month, the Business Alliance for Inclusion was formed, with Eagle Corporation leading the initiative. However, not everything was rosy. One day, while Ryan was presenting the initiative at another company, an executive confronted him. "How do we know this isn't just a phase? 6 months ago, you were known as one of the most discriminatory executives in the industry." Ryan took a deep breath before responding. "Precisely because of that, I am living proof that change is possible. I don't pretend to erase my past, but I do want to build a different future." The project began to attract media attention. Business magazines requested interviews, universities asked for conferences, and soon Ryan found himself being the face of a movement that transcended corporate boundaries. One afternoon, as he walked through the company hallways, he stopped in front of the newly installed mural in the lobby. It was a collage of photographs of employees from different backgrounds, genders, and abilities, all contributing to the company's success. Mary approached with a smile. "You know, when all this started, many of us thought it was just a strategy to look good for the new CEO, but you really changed." "No, Mary," Ryan replied. "We all changed. I just had to fall lower to realize I needed to rise higher." The sun was barely peeking over New York City when Ryan received an urgent call from David. The CEO's voice sounded tense. "I need you to see the news. Now." On his TV screen, a well-known morning business program was broadcasting a special investigation. The report showed old recordings of Ryan in various compromising situations, discriminatory comments in meetings, biased decisions in hiring, even the incident with David that had started it all. "Corporate hypocrisy, the true face of change," read the headline. "Richard Vega," Ryan murmured, recognizing his competitor's hand behind the report. Upon arriving at the office, the atmosphere was heavy. Employees whispered in the hallways, and social media was ablaze with comments about the report. The Business Alliance for Inclusion had already received calls from several companies wanting to dissociate from the project. "What do we do?" Carla asked during the emergency meeting. "This could destroy everything we've built." David, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "Ryan, remember what I told you on the first day. Words are easy. It's actions that count." Ryan nodded, an idea forming in his mind. "I need to make a public statement, not to defend myself, but to face my past head-on." That afternoon, in a hastily convened press conference, Ryan stood in front of dozens of microphones and cameras. "Yes, that man in the videos is me," he began. "Every recording is real. Every discriminatory action, every prejudiced comment, every biased decision. I'm not here to justify myself or to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to show that change is possible, but only if we're willing to face our mistakes honestly." He proceeded to present concrete data on the company's transformation, employee testimonials, and tangible results of the inclusion program. Joe, now the IT director, took the podium to share his story. "The Ryan Mitchell in those videos would never have given me a chance," Joe said. "The man you see today not only gave me one, but is helping create opportunities for thousands more." The press conference went viral, but not in the way Richard Vega had hoped. Social media filled with messages of support and similar testimonies of personal transformation. However, the toughest test was yet to come. That night, while Ryan was having dinner with his mother, he received an unexpected call. It was his uncle Edward, his father's older brother and one of the company's most important investors. "What are you doing with your father's company, Ryan?" Edward's voice thundered. "All this inclusion circus is scaring away serious investors. If you don't rectify the course, I'll sell all my shares." The threat was serious. A massive sale of shares could destabilize the company and put the entire program at risk. "Uncle," Ryan responded calmly, "Dad always said that the true value of a company isn't in its stocks but in its people." "Your father was a dreamer," Edward spat. "That's why I had to keep the business afloat all these years." "No, Uncle. Dad was a visionary, and now I understand why." The conversation ended at a stalemate, but Ryan knew the battle was just beginning. The next day, he called an extraordinary board meeting. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "we're at a turning point. We can retreat under pressure, or we can prove that our commitment to change is unshakable." He presented a bold plan. Opening the company to small investors, especially from communities traditionally excluded from the stock market. The proposal was revolutionary and risky. "It's madness," protested one of the board members. "The markets will punish us." "Or they'll reward us," David interjected. "Sometimes the greatest business opportunity lies in doing the right thing." The vote was close, but the plan was approved. The following weeks were a roller coaster. While Edward and other traditional investors sold their shares, new investors, attracted by the company's inclusive vision, began to buy. A month later, the stock price had not only recovered, but had reached new highs. Ryan's and the company's transformation story became a case study in business schools. "You know what's most ironic?" Carla commented during a team celebration. "Richard Vega thought that exposing your past would destroy us, but he only managed to make our message more powerful." Ryan smiled, observing his diverse team interacting naturally. "Sometimes we need to be reminded where we came from to appreciate where we're going." The conference room of the Ritz Hotel in London buzzed with anticipation. Executives from around the world had gathered for the Global Business Leadership Forum, and Ryan Mitchell was one of the keynote speakers. From villain to visionary, the Financial Times had titled their profile the week before, highlighting how Eagle Corporation's transformation had become a global model for organizational change. As he waited for his turn to speak, Ryan remembered the conversation he had with David before traveling. "You're not just representing the company," the CEO had told him. "You're representing the possibility of change that many believe impossible." The moderator announced him, and Ryan took the stage. Among the audience, he distinguished several familiar faces from the international business world, including Sarah Chen, CEO of a major Asian multinational known for its conservative policies. "A year ago," Ryan began, "I would have felt uncomfortable sharing a stage with many of you. Not because of your achievements or position, but because of my own prejudices about your origin, gender, or culture. Today, I feel uncomfortable for different reasons, because I know that some of you are where I was, trapped in prejudices that limit not only your companies, but society as a whole. During his presentation, Ryan shared data demonstrating how diversity had positively impacted Eagle Corporation's innovation and profitability. But it was during the Q&A session when something unexpected happened. Sarah Chen took the microphone. "Mr. Mitchell, your story is inspiring, but in many cultures, especially in Asia, radical changes in traditional hierarchical structures are frowned upon. How could we implement these changes without alienating our stakeholders?" The question touched on a crucial point. Ryan took a deep breath before responding. Inclusion doesn't mean destroying traditions, it means expanding them to embrace new realities. In the US, we also faced cultural resistance, but we discovered that respect for tradition can coexist with social innovation. After the conference, Sarah approached Ryan with a surprising proposal. She wanted to implement a pilot inclusion program in her company, but needed help navigating it culturally. However, the real test came that very night. During the gala dinner, Ryan received an urgent message from Mary. His niece Lucy, his sister's daughter, had been rejected in a job interview at Eagle Corporation. "The HR department says she doesn't meet the minimum requirements," Mary explained. "Your sister is furious and threatens to go to the media, denouncing that your inclusion speech doesn't apply to your own family." Ryan felt the weight of irony. In the past, he would have made a call to guarantee his niece's position without thinking twice. Now he faced a dilemma that would test everything he preached. Upon returning to New York, he met with Carla to review the case. "Lucy has good grades," Carla admitted, "but there are other better qualified candidates, including several from marginalized communities who have struggled against significant obstacles to obtain their education." "And what do you recommend?" Ryan asked. "That we do what we preach. Keep the process fair and transparent." The conversation with his sister was difficult. "So your famous inclusion doesn't include your own family," she complained. "On the contrary," Ryan replied. "True inclusion means everyone competes on equal terms without special privileges. But I propose something. We can help Lucy better prepare for future opportunities." To his surprise, this response not only calmed his sister, but became the basis for a new program. Mentorships for rejected candidates, helping them identify areas for improvement and prepare for future opportunities. Meanwhile, the pilot program with Sarah Chen in Asia was beginning to bear unexpected fruits. The company had found creative ways to integrate inclusive policies while respecting local traditions, creating a model that other Asian companies were beginning to notice. "It's fascinating," David commented during a video call with Sarah and Ryan. "Each culture finds its own path to inclusion, but the destination is the same: a fairer and more diverse business world." The story of Eagle Corporation began to replicate in different cultural contexts, each adapting the model to their own realities. Ryan found himself traveling the world, not as the arrogant executive he once was, but as a bridge between different cultures united by a common goal. One afternoon, while reviewing the mentorship program, Ryan received an unexpected letter. It was from Lucy. "Uncle," she wrote, "at first I was angry, but now I understand. I've been working with my mentor and have discovered areas where I really needed to improve. Thank you for not taking the easy way out." The auditorium of Columbia University was packed to capacity. Students, professors, and professionals had gathered to hear Ryan Mitchell give a lecture on the social impact of business transformation. As Ryan prepared to take the stage, he couldn't help but reflect on how his life had changed over the past 2 years. From being an executive feared and respected for all the wrong reasons, he now found himself being a reference for positive change. "Welcome," he began. 2 years ago, if someone had told me I'd be standing here talking about inclusion and social responsibility, I probably would have laughed in their face. But life has an interesting way of teaching us lessons. Over the next hour, Ryan shared not only Eagle Corporation's successes, but also the challenges and failures they had faced on their path to transformation. He spoke about how the change in corporate culture had begun to have a domino effect on society. "Our employees aren't just changing the way we work," he explained. "They're changing how they live their lives outside the office. They're educating their families, getting involved in their communities, demanding changes in other institutions. After the lecture, during the question and answer session, a young student raised her hand. "Mr. Mitchell, everything sounds wonderful, but what about small businesses that don't have the resources of a large corporation? How can they implement these changes?" The question made Ryan pause to think. It was true that until now his focus had been primarily on large corporations. "That's an excellent question," he responded. "And to be honest, it's an area we need to work on more. But I believe this is where you, the next generation of leaders, come into play." That night, back in his office, Ryan couldn't get the question out of his mind. He called Carla and David for an urgent meeting. "We need to expand our focus," he said. "We've been working with big companies, but what about the small and medium-sized businesses that are the heart of our economy?" Thus was born the Inclusion Program for SMEs, an initiative that sought to adapt inclusion and diversity strategies for smaller businesses. The program offered resources, training, and mentoring to companies that normally couldn't afford specialized consultancies. However, with this new initiative came new challenges. Some critics argued that Eagle Corporation was trying to monopolize the concept of inclusion, while others questioned whether a large corporation could truly understand the needs of small businesses. It was then that Ryan had a bold idea. "What if we invite our critics to be part of the program?" he proposed to his team. "Not just as participants, but as collaborators in the design." The proposal was risky, but they decided to go ahead. They invited leaders from small businesses, social activists, and even some of their most vocal critics to a series of round tables to redesign the program. The discussions were intense and often uncomfortable. Ryan found himself questioned not only about the company's policies, but about his own personal motivations. "How do we know this isn't just an elaborate public relations strategy?" asked Maria Gomez, owner of a small bakery and community activist. Ryan took a deep breath before responding. "I can't prove my intentions, Maria. I can only show them through consistent actions over time, and I'm here listening because I recognize that I don't have all the answers." As the sessions progressed, the program began to take on a new shape. It was adapted to include microcredits, community training programs, and a cross-mentoring system where large and small companies could learn from each other. The impact began to be felt in various sectors of society. Small businesses in marginalized neighborhoods began to flourish, hiring and training people who would have previously been excluded from the traditional job market. One day, while visiting one of these businesses, a small electronics repair shop in a working-class neighborhood, Ryan ran into Joe, the former janitor who was now IT director at Eagle Corporation. "What are you doing here?" Ryan asked, surprised. Joe smiled. "I come every Saturday to teach programming classes to the neighborhood youth. Some of them are already working on freelance projects for our clients." It was at that moment that Ryan truly understood the scope of what they had initiated. It wasn't just about changing a company or even an industry. They were planting the seeds of broader social change. However, with success came new challenges. Conservative groups began accusing Eagle Corporation of promoting an ideological agenda. Some politicians, feeling their interests threatened, started proposing legislation that would make it difficult to implement inclusion programs. Ryan realized that the battle for inclusion and diversity was far from over. In fact, it was just entering a new phase, one that would require navigating complex political and social waters. As he prepared for a meeting with his team to discuss these new challenges, Ryan received an unexpected text message. It was from Richard Vega, his former rival. "Ryan, we need to talk. Things are getting complicated, and I think it's time we join forces. Can we meet?" The exclusive Manhattan Club Cafe was almost empty when Ryan arrived for his meeting with Richard Vega. The man who had once been his fiercest rival was waiting at a discreet table in the corner. "Ryan," Richard greeted, standing to shake his hand. "Thanks for coming." "What's this about, Richard?" Ryan asked, getting straight to the point. Richard sighed deeply before speaking. "Things are changing faster than any of us anticipated. The movement you started, it's shaking the foundations of the entire business system." "And that's bad?" Ryan questioned, raising an eyebrow. "No, but it's dangerous," Richard replied. "There are powerful forces moving against us. Against all of us." Richard proceeded to explain how a group of traditional businessmen and conservative politicians were forming a coalition to curb inclusion and diversity initiatives. They were pushing for legislation that would make it almost impossible to implement equity policies in companies. "Why are you telling me this?" Ryan asked, still skeptical. "Because," Richard paused, "I realized I was on the wrong side of history. And because we need to join forces if we want to have any chance of winning this battle." Richard's proposal was bold, to form an alliance between the country's leading companies, regardless of their past history, to defend and promote inclusion and diversity policies. Ryan left the meeting with his head spinning. Richard's offer seemed sincere, but could he trust the man who not long ago had tried to destroy him? At the office, he called an urgent meeting with David, Carla, and the rest of the leadership team. "It's a trap," Carla immediately declared. "Richard just wants to jump on the success train now that he sees we're winning." "Or maybe," David interjected, "he's really had his own moment of revelation, as you did, Ryan." The discussion went on for hours. The risks were enormous. If they trusted Richard and it turned out to be a trap, they could lose everything they had built. But if they rejected the offer, and Richard was being sincere, they could lose a crucial opportunity to amplify their impact. Finally, Ryan made a decision. "We're going to accept the alliance," he announced, "but with conditions. We'll be transparent at every step of the process, and more importantly, we'll involve our critics and representatives from marginalized communities in the decision-making." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The news of the alliance between Eagle Corporation and Richard Vega's conglomerate shook the business world. Some saw it as a brilliant move, others as a betrayal of principles. Ryan found himself navigating increasingly turbulent waters. On one hand, the alliance gave them unprecedented power to drive changes at a national level. On the other, they faced growing resistance from those who saw the initiative as a threat to their interests. The turning point came during a public hearing in Congress. Ryan and Richard were testifying in favor of a law that would promote diversity on the boards of public companies. As Ryan spoke, he noticed a woman in the audience. It was Anna, the young analyst he had met at the beginning of his transformation. She now carried a baby in her arms and looked at him with a mixture of hope and concern. At that moment, Ryan departed from his prepared speech. "Ladies and gentlemen of Congress," he said, his voice charged with emotion, "this isn't about numbers on a balance sheet or meeting quotas. This is about the future we want to build for our children. A future where every person, regardless of their background, gender, or circumstances, has the opportunity to contribute and thrive." He looked directly at Anna and her baby as he continued, "Not long ago, I was part of the problem. Today, I'm here not only to be part of the solution, but to invite everyone to join this change. Because true transformation doesn't happen in boardrooms or corridors of power, but in the hearts and minds of each of us." The speech went viral, transcending the borders of the United States and resonating in business communities around the world. The law was passed, but that was just the beginning. In the months that followed, the alliance led by Ryan and Richard began to implement significant changes: cross-mentoring programs between large corporations and small businesses, investment funds specifically aimed at entrepreneurs from marginalized communities, and massive educational campaigns on inclusion and diversity. However, with each victory came new challenges. The resistance became more sophisticated and, in some cases, more aggressive. Ryan and his team found themselves fighting not just against deep-rooted prejudices, but against an entire power structure that resisted change. One night, as Ryan worked late in his office, he received an unexpected call. It was David. "Ryan," the CEO said, his voice laden with concern, "I just received information that they're planning a coordinated attack against us. Not just against the company, but against you personally. They're willing to use any means to discredit you and stop the movement." As he listened to the details, Ryan felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. They had reached a critical point. What they did next would not only define the future of their initiative, but could have repercussions on how companies would approach inclusion and diversity worldwide. The crisis room on the 50th floor of Eagle Corporation Tower was buzzing with activity. Ryan, David, Carla, Richard, and a team of legal and public relations advisors were working frenetically to anticipate and counter the imminent attack. "We have reports that they plan to leak old emails," one of the advisors informed. Conversations that could be taken out of context to discredit you, Ryan. Ryan nodded gravely. We can't deny our past. The question is, how do we face it? It was Carla who proposed the bold strategy. What if we get ahead of them? We published those emails ourselves, along with an honest narrative about how and why we changed. The proposal was risky. They would voluntarily expose the darkest aspects of their corporate past, but it would also demonstrate unprecedented transparency. Let's do it, Ryan decided. But let's take it a step further. Let's invite the people who were affected by our past actions to tell their stories too. For the next 48 hours, the team worked tirelessly. They launched an online platform called The Path to Change, where they published the controversial emails, along with honest reflections on each incident. But the most impactful were the testimonies from former employees, rejected candidates, and others affected by the company's old discriminatory policies. During lunch, Ryan found himself alone in the corporate cafeteria, until Mary, his assistant, approached with her tray. "Do you mind if I sit, Mr. Mitchell?" For the first time in years, Ryan really looked at Mary. She had been his assistant for 5 years, but he had never bothered to really get to know her. "Mary, why are you still being nice to me?" She smiled softly. "Because I believe people can change, sir. My grandmother always said that even the most crooked tree can be straightened with proper care." The initial reaction was a media whirlwind. Headlines oscillated between accusations of manipulation and praise for transparency. Social media exploded with divided opinions. In the midst of the storm, Ryan received an unexpected call. It was Lucy, his niece. "Uncle," she said, her voice charged with emotion. "I just read your post about how you denied me the job. I want you to know that I'm proud of you. And I'd like to tell my part of the story on your platform." Lucy's testimony, along with those of Joe and many others, began to change the narrative. What opponents had hoped would be a devastating scandal was turning into a powerful example of corporate accountability and transformation. However, the biggest challenge was yet to come. A group of powerful businessmen and politicians, feeling their interests threatened, called a press conference to announce a business integrity initiative. It was a thinly veiled attempt to discredit the inclusion movement. Ryan and his team knew they needed a forceful response. It was then that Richard proposed something unexpected. What if we take this to the field they least expect? The streets. The idea was bold, a peaceful march for inclusion and diversity, not just in New York City, but in multiple cities across the country simultaneously. They would invite employees, customers, and the general public to join. "It's risky," David warned. "It could get out of control. Or it could be exactly what we need to show that this is more than a corporate initiative. It's a social movement," Ryan replied. Organizing the march was a massive logistical challenge. They worked with civil society organizations, unions, and community groups to ensure a peaceful and representative demonstration. The day of the march dawned with palpable tension in the air. Ryan, dressed in a simple white t-shirt with the slogan, "Change begins with me," joined the crowd in front of Eagle Corporation Tower. To his surprise, he saw familiar faces among the crowd. Anna, the young analyst, now with her baby in a carrier. Joe leading a group of young programmers from the neighborhood. Lucy holding a sign that read, "Nepotism is not inclusion." Even his uncle Edward was there, although he remained on the periphery, observing with a mixture of curiosity and resignation. As the march progressed through the city streets, Ryan noticed something extraordinary. It wasn't just employees of large corporations. There were small business owners, students, construction workers, all united by a common cause. At one point, a reporter approached Ryan with a microphone. "Mr. Mitchell, what do you hope to achieve with this demonstration?" Ryan looked around before responding, "This is no longer about what I hope to achieve. Look around you. This is about what all of us as a society have decided is important. Inclusion isn't a business strategy, it's a moral and social imperative." The march culminated in front of Congress, where Ryan and other movement leaders delivered a petition with concrete proposals to foster inclusion and diversity at all levels of society. That night, as news channels broadcast images of the peaceful marches that had taken place across the country, Ryan met with his team in the office. "This is just the beginning," he said. We've started something that's bigger than us, than any company or industry. David nodded. The question is, what's the next step? It was then that Carla presented an idea that would change the course of their lives and the company. What if we turn Eagle Corporation into a public benefit company? We could rewrite our bylaws so that our commitment to inclusion and positive social impact is legally binding. The proposal was radical. It would mean completely restructuring the company and possibly facing resistance from some shareholders, but it would also send an unequivocal message about their long-term commitment. As they discussed the details, Ryan received a text message. It was from Richard. "Count me in for whatever you decide. This is bigger than the competition between us." Months later, at a historic shareholders meeting, Eagle Corporation officially became a public benefit company. The movement that had begun as a corporate inclusion initiative had transformed into a completely new business model, one that prioritized social impact as much as profits. Ryan, standing in front of the company's new logo that now included the words, "For an Inclusive Future," reflected on the journey that had brought him there. From being an executive guided by prejudice and unbridled ambition, he had become the catalyst for a change that transcended corporate boundaries. Real change, he thought, isn't about a moment of epiphany, but about the thousands of small decisions we make every day to be better. As he prepared for a new era of challenges and opportunities, Ryan knew that his personal transformation and that of the company were just the beginning. The real work of creating a more inclusive and equitable society was just starting, but for the first time, he felt they were on the right path. And so, as the sun set over New York City, illuminating Eagle Corporation Tower and the thousands of lives it had touched, Ryan understood that the most important legacy he could leave wasn't a business empire, but a world where every person had the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their background, gender, or circumstances. The journey had been long and full of obstacles, but finally, Ryan Mitchell had found his true purpose. And with it, he had helped write a new chapter in the history of business and society, one where inclusion and diversity weren't just buzzwords, but the fundamental pillars of a better future for all.